Oh, good morning, Yoshua.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Are you on a bus?
I'm in the train.
Train,
Streetcar.
okay.
Streetcar.
Streetcar, very good.
Yeah, the streetcar. That's how it looks. Streetcar. It's like Jerusalem.
Yeah, okay.
But this streetcar is like 60 years old. In Jerusalem, it's like 10.
Okay, and there are no bombs falling there.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make some announcements so that we can start. Okay. Let's do learning announcements first. A week of learning sponsored by Sharon. I last commemorate the yard site on the 10th. For Stephen Sharon's father, Erwin Cohen, Shalom Ben Yosef Cohen, Shalom Sharon Aliyah. Tomorrow we have a breakfast. Okay, you need to make a reservation for. You have fine, not you can come. Okay, that's for tomorrow. And next week, I heard from Sri Fisher, actually, he's supposed to give this year, and it's very tentative if they'll be back here. So I have to find out if I can find them a replacement, so you'll stay tuned. And then July 3rd, we have the Who Makes the Best Hamburger contest. Okay, we'll need someone to give this year for that as well. That's on Thursday, July 3rd. We have our panel of judges, Daniel Jason, Jerry, Jesse. Okay, so that's all said. If you haven't made a reservation for that, that's July 3rd. It's going to be at lunch. Okay, so if you'd like to join us, please make a reservation. Okay, let's see what time we can start.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It's strange how certain things stick out in your mind. I remember that in September of 1958, 2 years ago, was when I learned the 6th parak of brachos, Ketzad Mevorchim, on basically on which brachos you make on what. And for most people, things are fairly standard. Vegetables, you make borei prio adamo. On fruits, you make borei prio eitz. On cakes and crackers, you make mazonos. On bread and rolls, you make hamotzi. It was fairly simple. Then things got complicated. What bracha do you make on bagels? What bracha do you make on pizza? And a lot of discussions as people's eating habits or cooking habits may have changed. And then you had bagel bites, and you have melba toast, and all these things that were in mizonos, you make hamotzi. A lot of interesting questions that come up in terms of brachos. As society and the world develops, there is less and less arable land available for planting. Farming land is being sold to build condominiums or build factories, and there's less and less farmland available, not just in America, but all over the world, especially in Israel. In Israel, in Gaza, for example, or up north in the Golan, the land, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. There's a lot of volcanic material in the land, which sometimes can be helpful, sometimes not. In Gaza, when we were in Gaza, it was mostly sand, and there wasn't very much place to plant. So a whole industry grew up around hydroponics. And hydroponics has a lot of implications also in terms of Shemitah, because you have to allow the plants that are grown in the ground to lie fallow. but it doesn't apply to plants that grow in a nutrient solution, which had nothing to do with the ground. So a classmate of mine who lived in Gaza before the Jews were kicked out, had hothouses where he grew tomatoes and imported them to Europe, exported to Europe in nutrient solution. So basically, hydroponics consists of growing plants and vegetables without the use of soil. Without the use of soil, and there's a liquid solution of all the nutrients that the fruits or vegetables need, and the fruit grows. You can grow vegetables, you can grow trees, have nothing to do with the land. What bracha do you make on a tomato that's grown in a nutrient solution and never touched the ground at all? What bracha do you make on an apple that came from an apple tree that was grown in a solution or in a bunch of rocks that had nutrients in it? Nothing to do with the ground. Now, we know whenever you have a suffix, a doubt, in terms of which bracha to make, so usually shahakol covers everything. If you don't know if it's adoma or eitz, no, that's an interesting question by itself, but shahakol pretty much covers almost everything. The Gemara also notices that there is a category of, I call it vegetation perhaps, which is unique. The Gemara in Brachos, which is the basis for our entire discussion on hydroponics, it's Gemara in Brachos Daf Mem. So anything what does not grow from the ground, basically, meat, fish, birds, you say shahakol. Anything that's not adama or eitz is shahakol. On morels, which are mushrooms, or truffles, you make shahakol. So basically what the Gemara is recognizing is that there are things that grow that are edible that are not based on the ground. You make a shahakol. That mushrooms are a fascinating category. Mushrooms grow in the ground, but they get no nutrients from the ground. It's a very strange thing. And sometimes you see mushrooms growing out of tree trunks. Whether they get stuff from the air, how it grows, it's a whole discussion by itself. But mushrooms are the key, I guess, Talmudic basis for hydroponics, where you have things that grow without any nutritional benefit from the soil. And over that, you would make shahakol. So, for example, if you have a tomato plant in your office growing out of rocks and solutions, never touch the ground, this tomato, you'd make a bracha of shahakol, which could be very confusing to somebody not knowing where that tomato came from. If you took that tomato growing in hydroponics and you put it in a salad, and a person who's eating it did not know where it came from, it causes a problem. Yeah. Yeah. Grapes, I don't know about grapes grown hydroponically, but you would make shahakol, not ha'etz.
So you could make kiddush on it?
Could you? Yeah, that's an interesting question. You would probably, you could make kiddush on it if you made wine from these grapes, but you wouldn't say borei pri hagafen. Or maybe you could. No, I take that back, because you're not saying it did come from a vine. Grapes grow on a vine, so you are saying borei pri ha'etz, but. Interesting question. I haven't seen that. It's an interesting, but I'd have to look that up. That's an excellent question. Yeah.
get a tomato, grow tomatoes.
Yeah, yes, Chahako, yes. Because, again, Eitz and Adama are predicated on it growing from the earth.
Buy a tomato that's ready to pop. You don't know if the seeds original,
Okay,
it was in the ground and then went to the pot, or was it grown from seeds in the pot?
if you're buying it in a pot of dirt, then you make a regular Adama. Yeah.
That's what I mentioned.
Yeah. And again, there are those who might make an argument because the pot is not necessarily connected to the ground, but the dirt is dirt. But again, it's what you might call a botanical subtlety, if I can use that expression. There are things that grow in earth, but not from the earth. So like this pot of tomatoes is in dirt, but where did it come from initially? Where did the seed grow from? Was it germinated in a solution, or was it planted in the ground and then transferred to the pot? But once there's dirt in it already, but we're talking about things that are growing without dirt. Hydroponics is grown in inert material, in sand or gravel or rocks, and there's no connection. Now, sometimes they will have, and this is problematic. In Israel, they have these, what do they call it? Ditches, I guess you call them, or not, what do you call a long, not a long ditch? Huh? When you dig into a long thing in the ground, what's that? Furrow. Yeah, furrows in the ground, but the ground is full of gravel or sand, which is inert material, and the solution is in that sand. So the question is whether it goes through that sand into the ground. That could be problematic. In some places, that's how they do hydroponics. Most hydroponics are elevated off the ground in trays of solution in a hothouse. That's how they grow it. But hydroponics is not like mushrooms. And here's the discussion. Hydroponics is not like mushrooms because mushrooms, where does a mushroom get its source of nutrition from? Not the earth. The air. The Gemara and the Mefarshim seem to think the air somehow is what sustains mushrooms. And again, the fact that some mushrooms are very poisonous and some are edible tells you how toxic our air is, if in fact mushrooms get their nutrients from the air. But Abaye in the Gemara points out the fact that regardless of how the apple was grown, it seems to have gotten its nutrition from a liquid medium. And again, that would not be eitz or adoma, it would be shahako. And the ground-making psak was issued by Avadia Yosef in one of his chuvas, because this is a big issue in Israel where they don't always have arable land. You know, they say they made the desert bloom, but it didn't always bloom from the desert. It may have bloomed from hydroponic solutions. So he paskined anything that was grown from hydroponics to shahako. Rav Wasner and Shevet Levi disagrees, and he says regardless of how a plant or a fruit was grown, the bracha is based on how it normally grows. So that's the machlokas haposkim. Again, most people would paskin like Avadia Yosef, but sometimes you don't know. This is Milty's question. Sometimes you may not know. You go to somebody's house and they give you a nice salad, or a fruit salad, or vegetable salad, in certain areas, you don't really know how these fruits or vegetables were grown. So a shahakol covers everything normally. But this causes a problem with, you have a species that normally is grown in the ground and you're given it to eat. Unless you are in an area where you know that people grow things hydroponically. Now, there is a psak out there that when you walk into most vegetable or produce aisles, the assumption is that these were grown on farms from the ground. That's an operating assumption. It may not be true much longer because many people may go to hydroponics. First of all, economically, it might be cheaper because you don't have to own all that much land. You can build a hothouse anyway and set up your trays of nutrient solution and grow your fruits and vegetables. So this does come with a lot of interesting questions. And again, going back to my initial opening discussion, in terms of brachos, shahakol covers everything if you're really not sure. What if if you made the wrong bracha on something? What happens then? What happens if you made borei pri ha'adama on a mushroom? Accidentally, it's a vegetable. Although, is a mushroom a vegetable?
They show you eat something else, which you definitely know.
Well, again, best thing is wash and make hamotzi and you're covered. That solves all problems. But if, let's say, you're on a diet and you don't want to eat bread or grain, so and you have a mushroom salad, and you made borei pri adoma accidentally, do you have to make another bracha? Because a mushroom is not min hadama. So these are the types of questions that the poskim are arguing about. Modern hydroponics, there are different types of hydroponics. There are some hydroponics that are connected tangentially to the ground. If you have a furrow of inert material, but it's on the ground, roots could go through to the ground. That's why it's better to do it in a liquid solution above the ground. You solve all those problems. For Shemitah, it's a wonderful thing.
Not to wake you.
For Shemitah, it's a great thing because in Shemitah, you don't have to worry about produce, growing during the 7th year because it's not growing from the ground. So the hydroponic people make a lot of business during Shemitah year because people can buy their fruits and vegetables, mostly vegetables. Fruit is a little bit more difficult, but there are situations where they're actually growing fruit trees in a liquid solution of nutrients, and it's very confusing to eat an apple from a hydroponically grown apple tree. It looks exactly the same as a regular apple. What and to take a hydroponically grown apple and make a shahakol is a very jarring experience. I mean, this is a fruit, and I'm making shahakol on it, but it didn't grow from the ground. So
Where's the paper?
these are some of the issues that
Where's the
people,
paper?
especially in Israel, but other places as well,
You
are
know where I
grappling
leave
with.
it when I cut up?
Again,
When I leave?
there is an interesting question raised in the Gemara, in the Talmud Yerushalmi. Let's say you have grain. This is way before hydroponics ever existed. You have grain that was grown in a flower pot. Right? I took seeds and I planted it in a big pot and I grew grain. And then I made bread from this grain that grew in a flower pot. Do I make hamotzi lechem min haaretz on bread that was grown from grain in a flower pot, as opposed to grain that was grown in the land itself? Well, yeah. Well, that's where he's making the connection from this Yerushalmi. And again, The Yerushalmi does not come to any conclusion because if the grain never touched the land, how do you make that bracha? And it raises the question, but it doesn't answer it. And the poskim are debating about it. Well, hamotzi lecha min haaretz. No, correct, but the grain was not grown in the ground; it was grown in a flower pot. Again, maybe it's a fine line, but the question was raised; it just wasn't answered, and that's why we have poskim today. You go to a supermarket and you buy a head of lettuce, you don't know where that lettuce came from. Again, the normal assumption is that it came from a normal place, was grown in the ground. That's today. Tomorrow, that assumption, especially in Israel, may not be valid. And although I haven't seen it yet, I am sure that in the near future, in the Israeli supermarkets, the supersals, other places, maybe not in the Makolet, but in the supersals, there'll be a sign saying, these fruits and vegetables are hydroponically grown, and these were grown because people, especially in fruit neighborhoods, need to know what bracha you make. It's not a simple question. Yes, he agrees. He says because generically a fruit is a fruit and a vegetable is a vegetable.
He says if you make a bracha for
Yes, that would be his position. So, but most people would tend to follow Rabbi Yosef.
At least in the evidence, I suppose you could accept the view that if you weren't sure if you could make a bracha for a grain, hydroponics, then at least the basis of saying you make the right bracha.
Yeah. I mean, again, generically, it's a fruit. Technically, it may not have grown from the ground, but so what is true today may not be true in the near future, because as more and more crops are being grown in hothouses as opposed to on farms, and as more and more people are establishing settlements in an area where may not be arable ground to plant, this could become not just, I mean, it's an economic issue, but it's also a halachic issue. One of the things in Europe, by the way, in Europe, tremendous numbers of flowers are grown hydroponically. Now, we're not making brachos, we're not eating the flowers, but tremendous numbers of flowers that are imported into the States and into Europe, all over the country, are grown hydroponically. So people can have hothouses with flowers, but they're not grown in the ground, and that increases the amount of production for whatever type of flowers they are, the specifics. But and they advertise it as such, that these flowers were grown in hydroponic solutions, and you don't have to worry about bugs, so there are pluses and minuses. But in terms of brachos, right now, it is not a major issue, although it's becoming more so in Israel, where more and more crops are being grown hydroponically, and especially to help those farmers who otherwise would have to go without farming for 2 years during Shemitah, because it's the year of Shemitah itself, plus the following year when you're first planting. But if you're growing things hydroponically, then Shemitah wouldn't apply. So that would be an economic boon to those particular farmers. It's a fascinating halachic discussion. Yes?
In places like Japan, they're doing what they call vertical farming. They put up like a 10-story building, and each floor they have plants growing.
No, hydroponics
They
is
don't have the space, they don't have the ground.
right.
We have to feed the population.
So this is definitely the wave of the future, and hopefully, I mean, in American supermarkets, you're not going to have signs saying this is Shahako or this is Borei Pri or Adama. But I can certainly see it in Petach Tikva and other communities where they import hydroponically grown produce, that there'll be one aisle for Adama, and one hour for Eitz, and 1 hour for Shahakol, because people have to know what they're buying. It's a fascinating discussion. Anyway, B'tei Avon. Okay, have a good day.
Wally.
Yes,
Wally,
1 second, Nathan.
I always have this question, I never remember to ask it. Why is there an inconsistency on rice between the bracha that we make on it and the bracha on rice?
Okay, because rice, it would be mazonos for a bracha rishona. It's a big discussion on the poskim, but it's not technically a grain. It's not technically a grain like wheat, rye, oats, barley, and spelt. Those are the ones that are.
So when you make a shot, you want to say barley or first shot, so you
Yes, that is a point of view, but that is not the accepted psak.
You're trying to say, what I mean, we want to try to make it on both ends.
It's
So
one of the.
right.
It's in the halakhic category of nishtahin and nishtaher. Nathan, yes.
Wally, all fruits are Hadoma?
No, fruits are eights. Fruits.
Even though, okay, fruits are all fruits, even grapes.
Well, not all fruits. For example, bananas and pineapple are not eights. They're adama, because those trees are not regular trees. They cut. Melons are adama. But
Grapes are the same as other fruits.
I'm sorry?
Grapes have the
No,
same.
grapes are not the same because they grow on a vine. That would be so that would be bori pri ha'etz.
All right.
It's above ground. Okay, brachas are a fascinating subject. Okay, so now we're gonna bench, which is another type of bracha. Okay, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Wally.
Great day, Wally.
Good day.
Thank you. A good day. Stay dry.
Hello?
Hello, Janusz.
Yeah, I want to show you something. This is the wine store. All wine is from Israel
Fantastic.
and all kosher.
Enjoy it.
Ah,
Have a great day, Yoshua.
You too.
Have a sign of Orech.
You have to say al milchia. Al milchia, you have to say. Wally and David, yeah. But you have to say al milchia. Al milchia, you have to say.